Hello amazing people, well back to quick re-upload. Spoiler ahead. Enjoy and relax. The film begins in space, with the starship Avalon on autopilot, en route to the colony world of Homestead 2, during a major migration of the Earth's people. For the 120-year journey, the staff and 5,000 passengers are all sleeping in hibernation pods. The journey has lasted 30 years. The ship is traveling through a meteor storm, and power is redirected to the forward shields, but as it collides with a large meteor, the power blinks, red alert screens appear in the control area, and everything returns to normal shortly. Something terrible has occurred. A cheerful computer voice tells mechanical engineer Jim Preston that they will soon be arriving at Homestead 2 when he wakes up in his pod. He is taught that feeling disoriented and weak after hibernation is typical. The computer scans the wristbands on his arm and directs him to his cabin, where he sleeps. He wakes up the next day, observes what to wear when he meets fellow travelers, and then heads to a cafeteria where he is the only one. He attends an orientation seminar on Homestead about life as a colonist, but he is the only one present. The cheerful computer-generated instructor is confused by his inquiry as to why no one else is present. Jim visits the main concourse, but is unable to obtain assistance from the information kiosk. He discovers a place to convey a message to the Homestead Company, which he is warned will be costly. He sends a message indicating that he is the only one awake and in need of assistance, only to discover that no one on Earth will get it until 15 years. He has to fend for himself. Jim locates all of the ship's equipment manuals. He looks over the documentation for the hibernation pods, but can't seem to figure out how to restart it once the person has awoken. He is unable to enter the area where the crew pods are located in order to try to rouse anyone for assistance, and he is also unable to enter the command area. His wristband doesn't provide him with the necessary clearance. Jim meets the robot bartender Arthur, with whom he can converse, although the robot is programmed to give bartender advice, such as changing things up if you don't like where you are. Jim is a first-class customer in a modest cabin who upgrades to a suite with more luxurious facilities. A year passes as Jim takes use of the ship's entertainment options, but he grows increasingly lonely without the company of others. He proceeds to a location where people can don a spacesuit and venture outside while being safely linked to the ship. Jim considers killing himself by opening the airlock without a spacesuit, but he is stopped and runs into the pod area. He comes close to a pod with Aurora, a gorgeous woman inside. He examines the passenger profile she had created prior to the ship's departure. She is a journalist who is visiting Homestead in order to have an adventure and learn more about why people chose to be colonists. He thinks she's ideal after reading her novels. He debates whether or not to wake her up, knowing that doing so will commit her to death aboard the ship, but he can't handle the isolation after a year alone, so he wakes her up manually, hiding before she sees him. The same cheery computer program wakes up Aurora and leads her to her cabin to sleep. The next day, Aurora wakes up alone and travels to the Great Concourse, where she meets Jim. He tells her the truth about how long he's been awake, but not that he's the one who woke her up. Arthur, the mechanical bartender, has agreed not to tell Aurora what he has done. Aurora and Jim talk every day about what they can do to fix the pods. Aurora goes for a swim, runs, and starts writing her novel. She inquires as to why Jim left Earth, and he responds that he enjoys making and fixing things, and that on Earth, things are replaced when they break and are not repaired. He desires to live in a home that he constructs himself. Her plan was to travel to the colony, spend a year there talking to colonists about why they left Earth, then return to Earth. Aurora is a gold-class traveler who takes use of her rank to get him more luxurious breakfasts than his ordinary clearance allows. Jim asks Aurora out on a date after some time of getting to know each other, and she accepts. He brings her to the spacesuit chamber after they eat, where there are two suits, and they both get suited and head outside. Aurora is overjoyed when she returns home, and the two go to Jim's cabin and make love. They are content, going about their daily routine of exercising, stargazing, and enjoying the ship's entertainment and dining options. Another year passes, and Aurora's birthday arrives, and Jim prepares a special present for her. A ring. When they enter the bar, Aurora tells Arthur that she and Jim have no secrets, and Jim agrees, not aware that Arthur interprets this as Jim telling Aurora that he woke her up. When Jim enters the men's room, Arthur tells Aurora what a wise decision it was for Jim to choose Aurora to wake up. Aurora is devastated and enraged, and she warns Jim to stay away. She breaks into his cabin one night while he is sleeping and assaults him with her fists. Jim uses a ship's intercom to try to explain himself while Aurora is running, but Aurora shouts that Jim killed her. While this is going on, the control room is receiving more and more system failure alarms over time. Small things, like the cleaning robot system faults, have been detected by Jim and Aurora. The meteor crash occurred 2 years ago. Gus, a deck crew chief who has woken up early, appears on the hallway one day. He says that hibernation pods have never failed previously and that something significant is wrong. His wristband allows them access to the command center, where they discover that the ship's automatic diagnostics have failed, requiring them to physically inspect each deck. A massive gravity collapse occurs while Gus is doing testing, and Aurora nearly drowns while swimming in the pool. Gus discovers a series of cascading failures, and the computer can create a timeline that reveals the first failure occurred 2 years ago. Gus discovers that the initial few failures resulted in power diversions in an attempt to re-equalize the load, but the load got too great, resulting in a cascade of failures. The entire spacecraft is on the verge of dying in space, endangering the entire crew and passengers. The primary engine section was the first to be harmed, but they'll have to undertake a physical inspection to figure out where. Gus falls at this moment, and Jim and Aurora rush him to the hospital, where he is placed in the medical auto-diagnostic scanner. Because of the defective hibernation pod, he has numerous necrosis across his body, and death is inevitable. He puts on his uniform and ready to die, then hands his wristband to Jim and Aurora, so they may get to the regions of the ship where they need to mend things. In engineering, Jim and Aurora discover a meteorite-caused hole that runs through some key places. Aurora is almost sucked out when they open one of the doors due to a hole in the hull. Jim uses a liquid sealer to further seal the hole after she blocks it with a pill he gives her. When the space becomes pressurized, they discover that the fusion engine exhaust must be manually vented. When the manual override fails, Jim must don a spacesuit and walk outside to repair it. He has to go into the exhaust channel to open a flap, but it won't stay open unless Jim holds it open long enough for the manual vent to work. Aurora fights with Jim on the radio, hoping not to lose him, but she pulls the lever. Jim is forced out, his tether snaps, and his suit is ripped apart. He bids Aurora farewell. She rushes to put on a spacesuit and head out to find him. Jim is retrieved by gripping his leash, however he is unresponsive once inside. She carries him to the hospital, where the autopsy confirms Jim's death. Aurora gets the machine to resuscitate Jim using Gus's wristband and his override code, and it works. She is relieved and happy that he is alive. On the ship, things have returned to normal. Jim is working on the auto dock and tells Aurora that he discovered that he could put her back in hibernation in the infirmary using the command override, but that he would be alone again. Aurora decides to stay awake with Jim and build a life on the ship with him. 88 years later. It's the end of the voyage, and the captain and crew awake and come to the Grand Concourse to find there is a huge tree, lots of trailing vines and vegetation, birds flying, and a cabin that might have Jim and Aurora's grandchildren in it. Aurora's voiceover is reading her story to the passengers, explaining how they made a good life where they were.